Hello everyone, today's prompt is 15 and it sounds like what constraints are there on the pursuit of knowledge? And Sonia has already researched this question and she knows a lot about that because she completed her exhibitions about that. Could you please start and tell me about that?
Yes, of course. Hi, Demon. It was the first question, the first prompt that I chose in my IB journey, and I thought that it's really resonated with me. So that was the reason for me to choose it. I feel like there are different type of constraints that we can talk about. The constraints that are put on someone by someone, for example, a government on their people, or it could be a constraint that is like a psychological barrier of an individual that is created by internal or external forces. My exhibition was based on the second type. I thought that it will be more interesting to research the type of constraint that is identified as an individual psychological barrier. Yeah, do you have any questions about the types of barriers? Should I give some examples?
Yeah, please, could you provide me with some examples of the barriers and how you found them?
Yeah, I think mostly I found them from my personal experience. For example, I know, I read and researched that in China, people cannot use most of European websites and apps like Google or YouTube that are connected to Google. Yeah, and they needed VPN for that, or they just did not use those. And I think this is a type of constraint that is placed by a government on the people of China, not only on the Chinese people, but also on the people who are living in China. The fact that they cannot access the information and main European sources of information is a big constraint on the pursuit of knowledge to the knowledge seekers. For example, of a psychological barrier, I think the best example will be our elder generation, like grandmas and grandpas. As teenagers, I think a lot of us can understand this, that our grandmas and grandpas sometimes just cannot understand something that that seems fundamental to us. For example, something related to technology, right? And I think that is a type of psychological barrier that was created by internal forces like their personal experience or belief. They believe that they do not need something, so they will try not to understand, and that is a constraint that they themselves have put on the pursuit of knowledge. How are the examples? Are they understandable?
Yeah, that's really interesting, but do you think that these constraints sometimes can be beneficial for the government or for individuals?
Yes, I think. Oh, that's a good question. Yes, I think of course that can be, because if I call it a barrier or a constraint by internal forces, but such an internal forms or a personal experience can be trauma. After trauma, the constraint or the barrier placed on us is protecting ourselves and our organism from the trauma, right? So this constraint was beneficial for us at that moment. It, of course, has its own negative parts, but it can be beneficial, and we can find a lot of examples where most of the time the constraint was put with, I don't know, a good goal in mind, something kind. Is that enough of an explanation?
That's really good. And would you like to add something more about that?
Yeah, I can continue to talk about the way I explored this topic. So I explored it as an individual barrier that was placed by the individual on themselves. And one example I have already told you, it's like our elderly generation that is already content with the knowledge that they have acquired in their life. So they feel like their trusted knowledge is enough, And now the new knowledge seems too scary for them and they try to ignore it and they don't believe that it will make their life easier. So that's one of the constraints. And I think this really good connects to the concept of hierarchy of competence. It is from psychology and I really like it. It was created by Frank A. de Philippe in the book called, I think it's a book or an article called Management of Training Programs. They talk about how a knower is subconsciously created a constraint on the pursuit of new knowledge because they're already content, as I said, with the knowledge they have and may deny the usefulness of the new knowledge and see no importance in the pursuit of it. And that happens. And in that hierarchy of competence, it is the first stage of a person who does not know what they do not know and they do not try to break this constraint. So my exhibition was also based on the idea of who can suppress this constraint that they themselves put on themselves. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. As I understood in your exhibition, the elderly generation led as an example of how the constraints can be a part of their lives. But do you think that it also can be in our, the younger generation? Have you noticed any constraints in our generations?
Oh, I did not think about any examples beforehand. To be honest, I definitely think that there are constraints since it's a psychological thing every individual has. Most of the time, they're unconscious, and most of us should have such a constraint that we know that we do not know something, but we do not try to suppress this constraint or break down the barrier because we don't think that breaking it down will help us. And I think it can be just like on daily basis. Some things like, I don't know, I cannot cook and I don't want to know how to cook because why would I need to cook if I can just have takeouts from Chinese restaurant nearby? So perhaps that can be classified as a constraint that I do not want to break. Can that be
Mm,
as an example, Dima?
I would like to continue your idea because I think we can act in this way when our how to say, when our effort is optional in some way and we can just leave it and someone else can do that or something else can replace our effort. And actually, I have noticed something similar in my family when my mom asked me to help her with some technology because it's easier for her to ask me to help her than to understand how to work with some kind of technology. And I think this way when our effort is unnecessary is the main constraint in everyday life.
That's an interesting observation. I did not think of that. Okay, let me go on to the second stage of the hierarchy of competence. It is the stage of a student where you are now conscious of the constraint that is before you and you try to break through it. So it's like, I know that I don't know something, and I think that is something that a lot of IB students can understand fully. In my exhibition, as an example, I used a Chinese instrument called the Xun. It's a 10-hole instrument that is, I think it's the oldest known Chinese instrument. And I had it a long time and I never knew how to play it because all the tutorials I found in YouTube and everything were in Chinese. And that's another constraint I have. I do not know Chinese on that level to understand those tutorials and to understand the people who play this instrument historically because they are so different culturally from me. And that is a constraint I have. So the knowledge is acting as a constraint between me and learning and the pursuit of knowledge, learning to play this instrument. And I, differently from my grandma, I know about this constraint and I want to suppress it. So I learned Chinese to learn to play the Xun. So the knower here is acknowledging the presence of this constraint And because they acknowledged it, they have the ability to overcome it. Do you feel like
Hmm.
this, like an IB student? Like you don't know anything, but you try to understand it somehow.
Actually, it does describe the way how I learn in IB and my everyday life. And I would like to ask you more about the hierarchy of competence because I do remember you told me there is a stage which you disagree with. Is it?
All right. Yes, the stage I disagree with is the last stage. Oh, let me go through the third stage so we can get to the stage I disagree,
Okay.
which is the fourth one. And I do not disagree to it completely. I just don't think it was the place in my exhibition. The third stage is the stage of conscience competence. It's like the stage, I don't know, of a teacher, of a master who knows that they know something. And in my example, I think I try to portray my dad, who's a good professional in his profession. But sometimes I feel like he does not want to listen to new knowledge that I give him, that I try to make him understand, and I'm interested in him knowing something new. And I felt that it's a constraint of his, um, where a person can start hoarding their knowledge, which can be considered a personal valuable asset. And in this case, they will create a constraint to knowledge sharing with other people. So they will think, okay, my knowledge is valuable, I can get money from it. So now I won't be sharing this knowledge with you because why would I share something that I acquired so hard? I worked for it so hard. And after this, they will also stop trying to pursue no new knowledge because they will think, oh, I know a lot, and this a lot is valuable. So why would I need to learn something from people who know less than me? And that is the problem I think can be found in conscience competence. The four stages of competence is just an example here. I do not use it to its full potential, so you guys can read about it, research it yourself, but that's how I interpret being stuck in any of these steps, stages of competence. Okay, and the last competence that you talked about that I did not include in my exhibition is the unconscious competence. It is when an individual is so good with the knowledge that they have acquired that it will become a second nature to them and they will be able to use it very easily. So for example, if you prepare for your IB exams so good that you won't be even thinking about the formulas in physics, they will just come, they will be coming to your mind without any stopping and resting. And I think this stage of competence is more connected to something practical, like you can start rope jumping and it will become an unconscious skill of yours to rope jump and not trip over the rope. So I did not add it to my exhibitions since it is not as psychological as all my other examples. And I like the idea of it not being the last stage, but we should go back to the second stage of a student and see that the only thing I don't know is that I don't know anything, and I like that quote a lot. So, what do you think?
Actually, I agree with you because I also think it's the last stage of knowing something when you understand that you don't know everything and it shows how many of everything you can see in the world, but you can understand everything of that. I think it's a good point to finish our podcast. Thank you for sharing. Goodbye.